Mexican cartel burns down K9 training facility. Then the dogs show their combat skills. Hope Valley K9. Training center lay quiet under the vast Texas sky, its perimeter lights casting pale halos across the packed dirt. Situated near the Texas-Mexico border, the facility was both a refuge and a fortress, where elite K9s were molded into warriors. The sun hung low, shadows lengthening as handlers wrapped up their drills, unaware of the storm gathering to the south. Amanda Collins moved with purpose between the kennels, her sharp eyes scanning both dogs and staff with the precision of a battlefield commander. Years of military service had left their mark. A scar beneath her right ear, a limp barely noticeable, and a demeanor that brooked no nonsense. Beside her trotted Rex II, a Belgian Malinois with amber eyes and a coat that gleamed even in the fading light. He moved smoothly, ears pricked, muscles taut, the very image of discipline and lethal efficiency. He'd been her partner in countless operations, and here, far from the sands of the Middle East, he was finally at ease, or so Amanda had thought. Across the grounds, Ethan Drake, her second-in-command and a former Marine sniper, adjusted a surveillance camera with the precision of a man who trusted nothing and no one. "Got movement to the south," his voice crackled over Amanda's earpiece. "Might be nothing, but we should stay sharp." Amanda's jaw tightened. Nothing out here was ever just nothing. She'd spent too many years in counterterrorism to believe in coincidences, especially so close to cartel territory. The K9s seemed to share her unease. Ghost, a white German shepherd who had saved a special forces unit from an ambush in Syria, stood at attention by the fence, nose lifted to catch the faint desert breeze. His eyes, almost silver in the dim light, narrowed as if detecting an unseen enemy. Nearby, Thunder and Shadow, expert trackers, moved restlessly, paws scraping the dirt in agitation. Diego, a German shepherd recovering from wounds that should have ended his career, limped slightly but refused to be left out. His dark eyes fixed on Amanda, waiting for a command. As Amanda approached the command center, a low growl from Rex II stopped her cold. The Malinois stared southward, fur bristling, a rumble deep in his chest. Seconds later, the high whine of a drone split the silence, too faint for most human ears, but clear as a siren to the K9s. "Ethan, you hearing that?" Amanda muttered, fingers instinctively brushing the pistol at her side. "Affirmative," Ethan's voice came back, tight with tension. "That's not ours." Surveillance feeds flickered, cameras straining to pierce the deepening gloom. Amanda's fingers flew over the control panel, bringing up thermal imaging. Her eyes narrowed. 30 heat signatures, moving fast and low, armed to the teeth. "Get everyone inside," Amanda ordered, voice hard. "Lock it down. This isn't a drill." Her words barely reached the team when the first explosion tore through the south fence, a bloom of fire and earth that lit the sky. The blast wave rattled the command center, monitors flaring static before resolving into chaos. Men in tactical gear pouring through the breach, rifles spitting fire. The K9s erupted into motion, a living tide of muscle and fangs. Rex II surged forward, teeth bared, Ghost a white blur at his side. Amanda's voice cut through the chaos, barking orders that her team obeyed without question. Layers of defenses activated, automated turrets spitting suppressive fire, smoke grenades disgorging clouds that billowed like storm fronts. But Los Guerreros Muertos had come prepared. Under the command of Salvador Torres, known as El Fantasma for his ghost-like ability to strike unseen, the cartel's soldiers moved with grim precision. They wielded military-grade hardware, their assault coordinated and unrelenting. Amanda caught sight of one of them through the command center monitors. A tall man in black fatigues with eyes like dark glass. His hand signals were crisp, each gesture sending waves of men forward. The odds were impossible, but Amanda had faced worse with less. Rex II tore into the first wave, jaws clamping down on a gun arm with the force of a steel trap. A scream cut short as the man crumpled, rifle clattering useless to the dirt. Ghost followed, a blur of teeth and fury, striking with surgical precision. The cartel's advance faltered, men falling back under the onslaught, unprepared for the ferocity of their resistance. Ethan's rifle cracked from a rooftop perch, each shot dropping a target with lethal efficiency. How many? Amanda barked, moving between monitors, eyes flicking from the heat signatures to the tactical map. Too many, Ethan's voice was clipped, breathless. We can't hold them all. Amanda's mind raced. The bunkers were secure, but the perimeter was crumbling fast. Desperation crept in, cold and insidious. She keyed the radio. All units fall back to inner defenses. Do not let them breach the kennels. Her eyes darted to the rows of cages where dogs snarled and lunged, teeth flashing in the dim light. Losing them wasn't an option. These weren't just dogs. They were soldiers, her soldiers. A flash of movement on the cameras drew her gaze. A cartel soldier planting explosives along the east fence. Amanda's pulse kicked, fingers moving instinctively to her sidearm. Rex, go! The Malinois shot forward, a streak of brindled muscle and wrath. He hit the man low, jaws closing on the wrist holding the detonator. Bones snapped with a sickening crunch. The explosives clattered harmlessly to the dirt, but victory was fleeting. More soldiers flooded through the breach, forcing the defenders back step by bloody step. Diego, despite his limp, threw himself into the fray with a snarl, teeth flashing white. Thunder and shadow moved in tandem, weaving through the chaos, disabling enemies with ruthless efficiency. El Fantasma's voice cut through the battlefield, cold and mocking over a loudspeaker. Surrender now, Collins, he drawled. You're outnumbered and outgunned. Give us the dogs and I'll consider mercy. Amanda's lip curled. Her fingers tightened on the radio. Come and get them, she shot back, voice low and lethal. The cartel leader's laugh echoed, chilling as grave dirt. Then more explosions, closer now, shaking the ground with bone-rattling force. Dust and smoke choked the air, visibility dropping to zero. But Amanda's voice held steady, cutting through the panic. Form up, keep the K9s close. We hold here or we die. And so the line was drawn, a tenuous hope clinging to the loyalty of battle-hardened dogs and the iron will of the woman who led them. The storm had broken over Hope Valley, and dawn was still a long way off. The explosions left a dull ringing in Amanda's ears, each detonation a fist slamming the ground, shaking dust from the rafters of the command center. Screens flickered with static, cameras struggling to keep focus through the smoke that rolled in thick waves, tinged orange by the fires raging at the southern fence. Amid the chaos, Rex II prowled at Amanda's side, teeth bared, eyes flashing with lethal intent. She moved quickly, mind sifting through 1,000 variables. Ammo counts, casualty reports, the speed of the enemy's advance. The perimeter was buckling under the weight of the assault. The automated turrets had been reduced to twisted metal, their ammunition exhausted in a hail of gunfire that littered the ground with empty casings. Over the comms, Ethan's voice was tight, each word clipped as he called out enemy positions from his perch atop the North Watchtower. They're bringing up RPGs, he snapped. We've got 3 vehicles incoming from the west, heavy armor. Amanda grit her teeth, fingers dancing over the control panel, eyes fixed on the tactical map. The cartel's push was coordinated, tactical. El Fantasma's fingerprints were all over it. The bastard was ex-military himself, former Mexican special forces with a reputation for brutality and precision. That he'd turned his skills to cartel work wasn't a surprise, but the scope of the assault, drones, explosives, armored vehicles, spoke of a far larger operation. They hadn't just come to capture the dogs, they meant to erase Hope Valley from the map. Deploy the sentries, Amanda ordered, voice sharp. Conserve ammo, aim for the gunners first. We need those RPGs down. Acknowledgements crackled back, voices taut with adrenaline and pain. Screens flashed as sentry guns activated along the remaining barricades, swiveling to spew lines of tracer fire into the gloom. Explosions flared at the west fence as RPGs streaked in, shredding concrete and razor wire in thunderous bursts. Amanda flinched as a round struck the command center's outer wall, the impact throwing her off balance, monitors flaring and dying in a cascade of sparks. She tasted copper, realized she'd bitten her tongue, wiped her mouth with the back of a gloved hand. Rex II whined low in his throat, ears pinned, but he held his ground, eyes locked on the door. Through the cracked monitor screens, Amanda saw Ghost leading a counter-assault, his white fur a phantom blur against the darkness. His squad moved with practiced precision, flanking the cartel's advance with a series of well-timed ambushes. In the chaos, thunder and shadow wove between enemy lines, a deadly ballet of fangs and muscle, cutting down men who wandered too far from their squads. Diego, despite the fresh bandages wrapping his flank, was in the thick of it, limping but relentless, tearing into a rifleman with a snarl that cut through the gunfire. His handler, Nate, moved with him, sidearm flashing, eyes wild but focused. "Come on, you bastards," Nate's voice came over the comms, raw and breathless. "You want these dogs? Come take them." But for every cartel soldier that fell, two more took their place, black-clad figures moving with mechanical precision, sweeping corners with practiced ease. Amanda keyed her mic, forcing calm into her voice. "Fall back to the main compound," she ordered. "We're getting cut to pieces out here." Ethan's response was immediate. "On it, but we're not going to make it unless we clear those RPGs." Amanda's eyes flicked to the monitors, jaw tight. El Fantasma's forces had broken through the southern fence entirely, fanning out across the training fields, sweeping toward the kennels where off-duty K9s barked and snarled. Senses filled with blood and gunpowder. If they reached the kennels, it was over. Amanda keyed her mic again. "Ghost, take your squad and intercept those RPG teams. Ethan, cover them. We lose those dogs, we lose everything." A series of sharp acknowledgments snapped back, and through the shattered screens, Amanda watched Ghost break off, his unit pivoting smoothly to storm the advancing RPG teams. Gunfire cut through the night, brutal and unending, the bark of rifles underscored by the throaty roar of shotguns and the rapid pop of suppressed fire. A fresh wave of explosions hammered the compound, smoke flooding through broken windows. Rex II's growl cut through the haze, a low and murderous sound. His ears pinned flat, eyes locked on the entrance as the doors buckled inward with a deafening crash. The cartel soldiers that spilled through moved with military precision, rifles raised, sweeping corners with brutal efficiency. Amanda fired first, 2 rounds catching the lead man-center mass, the recoil kicking up her shoulder. Rex II lunged, a blur of brindled muscle and wrath, slamming into the next man before he could fire. Teeth sank into flesh, a scream cut short by a savage twist. Amanda pivoted, sidearm spitting lead, each shot precise, deliberate. In seconds, the entry team lay sprawled and bleeding, weapons clattering useless to the concrete. But there was no time to breathe. More shadows loomed in the smoke, the staccato bark of rifles growing closer, each burst a hammer blow that reverberated through the walls. Amanda snatched a fresh mag from her vest, slammed it home, eyes darting to the monitors. Ghost Squad was locked in brutal hand-to-hand at the southern gate. Thunder and shadow, a whirlwind of claws and snarls amid the blaze of muzzle flashes. El Fantasma's voice growled over the cartel's frequency, harsh and commanding. "Push forward, take the command center." The radio crackled with acknowledgments, the cartel soldiers surging with fresh resolve. Amanda's pulse thundered in her ears, but she forced the panic down, jaw clenched so tight it ached. "Ethan, we're pulling back to the kennel barricades," she snapped, voice hard. "Set charges along the main hall. Blow it if they push us back any further." Ethan's voice came back hoarse but steady. "Copy that. We'll hold as long as we can." Rex II growled again, ears pinned flat as fresh footsteps echoed down the corridor, heavy and fast. The door buckled once, twice, then shattered inward, a wall of black-clad soldiers flooding through. Amanda fired until the slide locked back, dropped the mag, reached for another. There wasn't time. A rifle swung her way, muzzle flashing. Pain lanced up her side, red and blinding. She hit the floor hard, breath rushing out in a strangled gasp, fingers numb around her sidearm. Blood soaked her vest, warm and spreading. Rex II roared, a fury made flesh, slamming into the soldier before he could fire again. Screams cut through the smoke, wet and raw. Amanda forced her eyes open, vision swimming. The monitors flickered with fresh bodies, the cartel's numbers endless. Her hand slipped on the blood-slick concrete as she reached for her mic, voice rasping, raw with pain. "All units, fall back to the kennels. Hold the line." We can't let them. The words choked off, breath wheezing as the edges of her vision darkened. Rex the Second loomed above her, teeth bared, eyes wild with rage. And through the roar of gunfire, Amanda heard it, the distant howl of sirens, growing closer, a promise that dawn was coming. Amanda's breath came shallow and rapid, each inhale a lance of pain through her side, where the bullet had torn flesh and muscle. The copper tang of blood coated her tongue, warm and bitter. Rex the Second stood over her, a living bulwark of bristling fur and lethal intent, fangs bared and glistening in the fractured light of the command center. His growls rolled low and unceasing, vibrating through the floor where Amanda lay. Through blurred vision, she saw the bodies, black-clad figures sprawled lifeless, their rifles still clutched in stiff fingers. But there were more coming, always more. The distant roar of engines and the rapid staccato pops of gunfire echoed down the hall, drawing closer with every heartbeat. The command center's alarms wailed a dirge, red lights pulsing in time with Amanda's racing pulse. She gritted her teeth, forced her hand to move despite the tremors that racked her limbs, fingers slippery with blood as she fumbled for her radio. Ethan, she gasped, voice shredded and hoarse. Report! For an agonizing moment, there was only static, broken by the crackle of distant gunfire and the gut-punch thuds of explosions outside. Then Ethan's voice came through, raw and breathless, but blessedly alive. We're falling back, he rasped, each word laced with pain. Southern Gate's gone. Thunder's down. Can't tell how bad. Ghost is holding them at the kennels, but we're outnumbered 10-1. Amanda squeezed her eyes shut, bile rising in her throat, but she forced it down with sheer will. Pain was a distant concern. They were minutes from being overrun. She dug her elbows into the floor, gritting her teeth until they creaked, and dragged herself up inch by agonizing inch. Rex the Second whined low in his throat, nudging her with a cold nose, eyes glinting with a frantic intelligence. I'm okay, she lied, though each breath was fire in her lungs. We're not done yet. The hallway leading to the kennels was a jagged hellscape of concrete dust and shattered glass. Bullet holes pocked the walls, their edges dark and scorched, and the air reeked of cordite and blood. Amanda leaned heavily on Rex too, each step a battle against the darkness nipping at her vision. Her left arm hung useless at her side, fingers twitching in numb spasms. Ahead, the roar of gunfire was a continuous barrage, broken only by the vicious growls of K9s in full assault. The first body Amanda stumbled upon wore the black fatigues of Los Guerreros Muertos, throat laid open in a red ruin. Ghost's work. She pressed on, forcing one foot in front of the other, even as her legs trembled with the strain. They found Thunder first, crumpled against a half-collapsed barricade, blood streaking his dark fur. His handler, Ruiz, crouched beside him, one hand pressed to the dog's heaving side, the other clenching a sidearm that clicked empty with each desperate pull of the trigger. Amanda, he choked, eyes wide and glassy with panic. He's not. Thunder's breath rattled wetly, legs twitching, but his eyes rolled to Amanda, dark and glassy with pain, yet stubbornly refusing to dim. Amanda swallowed hard, throat thick. He'll hold, she ground out, each word a struggle. We need to get to the kennels. Can you walk? Ruiz blinked rapidly, teeth bared in something between a snarl and a sob, but he nodded, hauling Thunder into his arms despite the weight. Lead the way, he bit out, voice raw. The kennels were chaos made flesh. Barking, snarling, the roar of rifles and the deafening crack of grenades that sent shockwaves thrumming through Amanda's teeth. Cartel soldiers poured through the breach in a black tide, moving with ruthless precision, faces obscured by balaclavas and the glint of infrared goggles. But Ghost was a blur of white death, hitting like a thunderbolt, fangs flashing in arcs of crimson. His handler, Davis, fought with equal ferocity, shotgun booming, each shell ejected with vicious efficiency. Bodies piled at the entrance, sprawled in lifeless heaps, but for every man that fell, two more took his place. Amanda, you're hit, Davis shouted, eyes wide with alarm. Get the hell back! Shut up and hold the line, Amanda snapped, but the words lacked force. her knees buckling as another wave of dizziness slammed into her. Only Rex 2's solid bulk kept her upright. She forced herself to focus, eyes darting over the battlefield, mind racing through 1,000 contingencies. The K9s moved with brutal coordination, every snarl and snap a symphony of violence. Diego, despite his wounds, launching himself at a rifleman, dragging him down in a thrashing, bloody heap. Shadow weaving through the smoke, cutting down stragglers with surgical precision. But it wasn't enough. The cartel kept coming, inexorable, overwhelming. And through it all, the voice of El Fantasma, harsh and mocking over the radio waves. "Is this it, Collins? Is this all your precious dogs have?" Amanda's vision blurred red. Teeth gritted, she dragged herself to a comm terminal, fingers slick with her own blood slipping over the keys. Desperation drove her movements. She slammed a fist into the emergency override, felt the dull vibration as the automated defenses surged back to life. Sentry guns swiveled, pouring fire into the advancing ranks, buying precious seconds. "We need an extraction," she snarled into the radio, voice cracking. "Ethan, status?" The answer was static, then a grunt of pain and Ethan's voice, hoarse and strained. "Barely holding." "LZ's hot, can't get a bird down until we clear it." The door exploded inward in a burst of fire and shrapnel, slamming Amanda into the wall with bone-jarring force. Ears ringing, eyes swimming with spots, she blinked up into the muzzle of a rifle, El Fantasma's cold eyes glinting behind the sights. "Any last words, Collins?" he drawled. But even as the words left his mouth, Rex 2 moved, a streak of brindled fury, teeth closing on the rifle with a bone-snapping crunch. El Fantasma staggered back with a curse, firing wild, rounds sparking off the concrete. Amanda's hand closed around her sidearm with a snarl. One breath. Two. She squeezed the trigger. The shot was deafening, a crack that split the air, and El Fantasma crumpled with a snarl of pain. Blood dripped hot and sticky down Amanda's wrist, but she was already rising, dragging herself to her feet, eyes fixed on the doors. The sun was a pale glimmer on the horizon, sirens wailing in the distance. Reinforcements. A bitter smile pulled at her cracked lips. Maybe, just maybe, they might survive the night. The sun clawed its way over the horizon, bleeding pale light through the smoke that hung thick and choking over Hope Valley. The distant wail of sirens cut through the chaos, growing louder by the second, but the fight was far from over. Amanda stumbled through the rubble-strewn hallway, one arm wrapped around her shredded side, each step a fresh agony that sent white spots dancing before her eyes. Her left leg threatened to buckle with every stride, muscles quivering under the strain, but she gritted her teeth and pressed on. There was no other choice. The corridor reeked of cordite and blood, the walls scarred with bullet holes and scorch marks where grenades had blown ragged holes in the plaster. Rex II prowled at her side, fur matted and darkened in patches with enemy blood, his muzzle flecked red, eyes wild and unblinking. The Malinois moved with a limp, a deep gash raked down his flank, but his growl was a constant, murderous rumble that reverberated through Amanda's bones, a promise of violence yet to come. Her radio crackled, Ethan's voice breaking through the static, hoarse and breathless, but alive. "Amanda, you copy," he rasped, each word tight with pain. Gunfire roared in the background, the distinct thud of a shotgun cycling, and a scream that cut off wetly. "We're pinned down at the kennels. Bastards are everywhere. I've got 2 men down and shit. Move! Move!" The transmission dissolved into a burst of static, the roar of rifles deafening. Amanda's pulse stuttered, ice creeping through her veins. But she forced herself to keep moving, fingers clenching the radio so tightly they ached. "Hold your position," she snapped, breath hitching with each step. "We're coming to you. Just hold." Rex II barked sharply, ears pinned, and Amanda's head snapped up, eyes narrowing. A dark shape moved at the end of the corridor, silhouetted against the smoke. The cartel soldier swung his rifle up. The muzzle flashed bright and blinding in the gloom, and Amanda threw herself sideways with a snarl, landing hard on the torn concrete. Bullets screamed past, ricocheting off the walls in a hail of sparks. Rex II hit the gunman like a thunderbolt. a streak of brindled fury, teeth sinking deep into the man's wrist with a crunch that echoed. The rifle clattered to the ground, discharging wild, and the soldier's scream cut off in a wet gurgle as Rex tore him down. Blood spattered warm across Amanda's face, the copper tang sharp on her tongue. But she was already hauling herself up, one hand pressed to her side, where blood pulsed sluggishly between her fingers. "Good boy," she grunted, voice raw. Rex's ears flicked back at her words, teeth still sunk deep in the gunman's throat, eyes glinting with a savage intelligence. It took a sharp command for him to release, blood dripping dark and slick from his muzzle as he turned, breath puffing white in the chill air. They moved as one down the hallway, Amanda's shoulder brushing his, every step a battle against the blackness, fraying the edges of her vision. Her side throbbed with each breath, the bullet hole a molten brand. But she gritted her teeth, forced herself to push past the pain. The doors to the kennels loomed ahead, battered and blackened with soot, one hanging half off its hinges. Beyond, the roar of battle surged relentless. Amanda tightened her grip on her sidearm, drew a breath that rattled wetly in her lungs, and shoved the door wide with a snarl. The scene beyond was hell-made manifest. The kennel yard was littered with bodies. Men in black fatigues sprawled lifeless amid smears of crimson. Rifles and blades scattered like so much refuse. K9s moved through the smoke, fur streaked dark with blood, teeth bared in snarls that raised the hairs on Amanda's neck. Diego, ribs heaving, threw himself at a rifleman, teeth flashing in a savage arc. Ghost prowled through the chaos, white fur stained and eyes burning like molten silver, every movement a lethal precision. Davis knelt behind an overturned truck, shotgun booming, each round a thunderclap that cut through the gunfire. His eyes widened when he saw Amanda, relief flickering for a bare second before he barked a warning and swung the shotgun up. "Get down!" he roared. Amanda didn't think. Muscles screamed as she threw herself sideways, rolling behind a stack of sandbags as the air above her shredded with bullets. The impact jarred her wounded side, pain blinding, and for a moment she couldn't breathe, couldn't see. Her ears rang, breath hitching as she dragged herself upright, fingers white-knuckled on her sidearm. A cartel soldier rounded the truck, rifle swinging, and Amanda fired on instinct. The first round caught him in the shoulder, spinning him with a snarl. The second punched through his visor, splattering crimson. He dropped without a sound, rifle clattering to the concrete. But there was no time to breathe. Ghost's snarl split the air, a warning that Amanda barely had time to register before the door to her left buckled inward. Hinges screeching, and a fresh wave of black-clad soldiers flooded through, rifles up. Rex II lunged, a whirlwind of teeth and claws, tearing into the first man with a snarl that vibrated through Amanda's bones. She fired until her slide locked back, spent casings clattering around her feet, the corridor choked with smoke and screams. A rifle butt caught her across the jaw, vision flaring white-hot, and she hit the concrete hard, stars bursting behind her eyelids. The cartel soldier loomed, rifle swinging down, but Diego intercepted with a roar, jaws clamping down on the man's wrist and wrenching him sideways with a sickening crunch. Amanda sucked in a breath, head spinning, blood dribbling warm down her chin, and dragged herself to her feet with a snarl. Her left leg nearly buckled, vision black at the edges, but she forced herself to stay upright, teeth bared. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but the sirens were closer now. Federal reinforcements, cavalry on the way. She just had to hold the line a little longer. Blood dripped sluggishly from her side, pooling warm and sticky, every heartbeat a sickening throb. Diego's growl rumbled at her side, dark and lethal, eyes fixed on the corridor where fresh gunfire roared. Rex II's hackles bristled, lips pulled back to bare crimson-stained fangs. They were cornered, wounded, half dead on their feet. But the cartel wasn't leaving this place without a fight. Amanda spat blood, wiped her mouth with the back of a trembling hand, eyes narrowed and deadly. "We're not done yet," she rasped, voice shredded but defiant, and thumbed a fresh mag into her sidearm with a click that echoed through the smoke. "Come and get us, you sons of bitches!" The roar of gunfire was deafening, each burst a hammer to Amanda's skull, echoing through the kennel yard in a relentless symphony of chaos. Her hands trembled around the grip of her sidearm, blood slick on her fingers, the metallic tang sharp in her throat. The pain in her side was a dull, throbbing agony that threatened to drag her down, but she forced herself to keep moving, boots crunching over shattered concrete in spent casings. Smoke hung thick and acrid in the air, stinging her eyes and filling her lungs with each gasping breath. Ahead, Ghost tore into a cartel soldier, jaws clamping down with a sickening crunch that echoed through the haze. His white fur was streaked dark with blood, eyes molten silver as he swung around, snarling to intercept another enemy. To Amanda's left, Diego moved with brutal efficiency, teeth flashing in arcs of crimson, a low growl rumbling from his chest that was more monster than dog. His handler, Nate, limped alongside, face pale beneath a mask of dirt and blood, eyes fixed and glassy. They were outnumbered 20-1, the cartel's assault relentless, pouring through the breaches in wave after wave, but the K9s held the line with a ferocity that bordered on suicidal. Ethan's voice crackled through Amanda's earpiece, breathless and tight with pain. "Command center's lost," he rasped, each word raw. "We're pulling back to the north barracks. Can't hold them any longer. They've got drones, RPGs, everything." "Jesus, Amanda, they're tearing us apart." His voice broke, replaced by a burst of static and the gut punch crack of a grenade. Amanda's pulse thundered in her ears, jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached. "Keep moving," she snapped, voice shredded. "Fall back to the kennels. We're making our stand here." Her radio buzzed with scattered acknowledgments, voices raw and fractured with pain, but her focus had already shifted. Eyes locked on the breach where cartel soldiers swarmed through, rifles flashing. Rex II prowled at her side, fur bristling, a low growl rumbling from his chest, eyes fixed and lethal. His ears were pinned flat, muzzle flecked with crimson, but he moved smooth and deadly, a shadow at Amanda's hip. They hit the cartel's line like a sledgehammer, Rex II lunging with a snarl that split the air, jaws clamping down on a rifleman's arm with a crunch that sent bone fragments skittering across the concrete. The man screamed, voice high and ragged, before Rex tore him to the ground, blood spurting dark and arterial. Amanda fired into the chaos, each round precise, deliberate, the recoil jarring through her arms and into her shoulders. Every shot was a struggle against the blackness that frayed her vision, the pain that radiated white-hot from her side. The slide locked back, empty, and she cursed, slamming a fresh mag home with fingers that shook and slipped on the blood-slick grip. A rifle swung up, muzzle flashing, and Amanda ducked instinctively, the round shaving past her ear with a hiss that left it ringing. Rex II moved like lightning, a brindled blur, slamming into the gunman's knees and tearing him down in a thrashing heap. Teeth sank deep into flesh, a scream cut short by a savage wrench of Rex's head. Blood spraying dark across the cracked concrete. But for every man that fell, two more took his place, a black tide that pressed inexorable, overwhelming. Amanda gritted her teeth, firing into the mass, eyes stinging with smoke and sweat, each breath a raw scrape. Her back struck something solid, a sandbag barricade, torn and leaking gravel, the last line of defense before the kennels themselves. Ghost bounded to her side, breath heaving, eyes glinting, fur streaked dark with blood. He snarled low, teeth bared, ears pinned flat, and Amanda reached out instinctively, fingers curling in his fur. "Hold the line," she gritted out, voice raw, the words more for herself than the dog's. "We hold or we die." Rex II's growl rolled deep and murderous, and he lunged again, claws scrabbling on the blood-slick ground, tearing into a cartel soldier with a snarl that vibrated through Amanda's bones. The man's scream was brief, wet, cut off by a sickening crunch of vertebrae. Ghost followed, a streak of white and wrath, hitting the next soldier with enough force to send them both crashing into a pile of twisted metal. Diego tore past, a whirlwind of muscle and fury, eyes dark and wild. Nate was right behind, sidearm flashing, blood dripping sluggishly from a ragged tear across his temple. "We're gonna die here, aren't we?" he bit out, voice rough and shaking. Amanda's eyes narrowed, breath rasping. Not if I can help it, she ground out, slamming a fresh mag into her sidearm, eyes fixed on the breach. Hold the goddamn line! The cartel's next push was brutal. Stun grenades burst in searing flashes, lighting the smoke in jagged arcs of white and gold. The shock waves hammered through Amanda's skull, vision flaring white, ears ringing with a high-pitched whine that drowned out the roar of battle. She hit the ground hard, ribs slamming against concrete, pain a lightning bolt down her spine. Rex 2's snarl cut through the din, dark and unending, and through the haze Amanda saw him rip into a cartel soldier, blood spurting in dark arcs. She dragged herself upright, limbs trembling, teeth gritted so hard she tasted copper. A rifle round clipped her shoulder, spinning her with a burst of white-hot agony, but her finger squeezed the trigger in reflex, catching the shooter between the eyes. He dropped without a sound, rifle clattering useless to the concrete. But it was too much. They were too many. The cartel soldiers pressed forward, relentless, rifles barking, bodies piling in lifeless heaps, and the K9s were flagging, movements slowing, blood streaking their fur dark and glistening. Diego's legs trembled with each step, eyes dull but defiant, and Ghost stumbled, a crimson stain spreading dark across his flank. Rex 2's breath rasped, froth flecking his muzzle, eyes burning but half-lidded with exhaustion. Amanda's chest tightened, breath shuddering, eyes darting between her K9s, and the breach where cartel soldiers stormed through, faces blank and pitiless. It was over. But then, the distant wail of sirens rose, sharp and piercing through the chaos. Flashing blue and red lights strobed through the smoke, and over the roar of gunfire came the heavy thump of helicopter blades, wind whipping the haze into swirling eddies. The cartel soldiers faltered, heads snapping around, eyes wide behind their visors. And then the cavalry hit. Federal agents in full tactical gear, rifles cracking with brutal efficiency, stormed the breach with a vengeance, cutting down cartel soldiers in sprays of red. The helicopters swept low, spotlights slashing through the gloom, and the cartel's line buckled, men stumbling back under the onslaught. Relief flooded through Amanda, raw and overwhelming, stealing her breath. Rex II barked sharply, eyes glinting, ears pricked. Reinforcements. They were going to live. As the cartel forces broke and scattered, Amanda slumped against the sandbags, side throbbing, blood dripping sluggish and dark. Rex II leaned into her, breath hot and ragged, eyes fixed on the horizon where dawn light bled pale and cold through the smoke. They'd held the line. Against all odds, they'd held. The sun rose slow and pale over Hope Valley, its light cold and bloodless through the lingering smoke, casting long shadows over the battlefield. The air was thick with the reek of cordite and blood, and the silence that followed the battle was heavy, a suffocating weight that pressed down on Amanda's shoulders. Her legs trembled beneath her, exhaustion settling into her bones with a leaden ache. But she forced herself to stay upright, one hand braced on Rex 2's shoulder. The Malinois was streaked dark with blood, some of it his own, but his eyes were sharp and unblinking, ears pricked as he scanned the smoking ruins for threats. His breath puffed white in the chill morning air, sides heaving, but the growl rumbling in his chest had finally subsided to a low murmur, a warning rather than a promise. Around them, the battlefield stretched in a grim tableau, bodies sprawled in lifeless heaps, rifles scattered amid shattered concrete and twisted metal. Federal agents moved through the smoke in teams, sweeping for survivors, radios crackling with clipped orders. Amanda's side throbbed with each shallow breath, the ragged hole just below her ribs pulsing hot and slick with every heartbeat. But she gritted her teeth and ignored it, eyes fixed on the cluster of agents near the south gate. They moved with crisp efficiency, rifles shouldered, helmets gleaming dull black beneath the rising sun. And at their center, shackled and bloodied but very much alive, was Salvador Torres, El Fantasma, his dark eyes fixed on Amanda with a smirk curling bloody and defiant across split lips. His hands were bound behind his back, wrists raw and chafed, blood trickling sluggishly down one temple from a gash above his brow, but the hatred in his eyes burned undimmed. One of the agents shoved him forward with a sharp command, and for a moment, El Fantasma stumbled, catching himself with a curse before twisting to sneer at Amanda. "Not bad, Collins," he rasped, voice thick with pain but mocking. "Didn't think you had it in you." Amanda's fingers tightened on Rex 2's fur, teeth gritting hard enough to ache. "Shut him up," she snapped, voice hoarse and raw with exhaustion. The agent at El Fantasma's side obliged with a brutal elbow to the ribs that left the cartel leader doubled over, gasping curses through blood-flecked teeth. Amanda's vision swam black at the edges, limbs heavy and unsteady, but she forced herself forward, each step a battle against the darkness nipping at her heels. The sirens were louder now, the rumble of engines and the bark of commands echoing through the smoke. But she fixed her eyes on the kennel yard, where her team was gathering, canines weaving through the chaos, with heads low and ears pinned. Ghost limped toward her first, white fur stained crimson, eyes dull but determined. His handler Davis half carried him, one arm wrapped around the shepherd's chest to support his weight. Diego followed, stumbling with each step, one leg dragging, but his eyes were fierce and unbowed, breath rasping in shallow, wheezing bursts. Thunder lay stretched out on a torn tarpaulin, sides rising slow and weak beneath Ruiz's shaking hands, blood dark and sticky beneath him. But his eyes rolled to Amanda, defiant and stubborn, and a low whine rumbled in his chest when Rex 2 approached, bumping their noses together in a brief, wordless greeting. Relief flooded through Amanda, raw and overwhelming, stealing her breath and making her knees buckle with the force of it. She dropped to one knee beside Thunder, ignoring the searing pain that lanced up her side, one hand curling gentle in his dark fur. "You held, buddy," she whispered, voice cracking. "You did good." Thunder's eyes fluttered, unfocused and glassy, but his tail thumped once against the concrete, weak but determined. Davis slumped down beside Ghost, one hand pressed to a gash across his temple, eyes glazed with shock but alive. "Thought we were dead for sure?" he rasped, voice barely more than a breath. Amanda huffed a laugh, bitter and breathless. "Me too." Ethan appeared through the smoke, limping heavily, rifle slung loose over one shoulder, blood streaking one arm where his sleeve was shredded. His face was pale beneath the grime and soot, eyes shadowed and hollow, but he managed a crooked grin when he saw Amanda, sharp and wry. "You look like hell," he drawled, voice hoarse with smoke and pain. Amanda snorted, though the sound tore through her lungs in a ragged cough that left her doubled over, vision flaring white. Ethan's grin faltered, eyes narrowing with concern, but Amanda waved him off, breath hitching. "Still prettier than you," she shot back, though the words came weak and rasping. The sound of approaching footsteps cut off Ethan's retort. Federal agents in dark tactical gear, helmets tucked under their arms, eyes hard and assessing as they swept the yard. One of them, a man with captain's bars on his vest and eyes like flint, stepped forward, gaze flicking over the scene with grim efficiency. "Collins," he barked, voice crisp. "Captain Reynolds, DHS. Hell of a fight you put up." Amanda forced herself upright, swaying slightly, eyes narrowed. "You're late," she bit out, voice brittle. Reynolds' mouth twitched in something that might have been a grimace. "Ran into heavier resistance than we expected," he said flatly. "Cartel had ambushes set up all along the highway. We came as fast as we could." Amanda's fingers tightened in Rex 2's fur, teeth gritting. "Doesn't matter," she ground out. "We held." Reynolds' gaze flicked to the K9s. Ghost, limping but alert. Diego, standing over Nate with eyes dark and watchful. Thunder, sides rising shallow but steady. His expression softened, almost imperceptibly. "That you did," he muttered. "Hell of a team you've got here." Amanda's chest tightened, throat aching, and she forced herself to breathe, each inhale a ragged scrape. "They're soldiers," she snapped, voice fraying. "Treat them like it." Reynolds inclined his head, something almost like respect in his eyes. "We will," he promised. "We've got medevac inbound. Get your wounded ready." Amanda's shoulders slumped with relief, legs trembling beneath her, and she sank back to one knee, fingers curling in Rex 2's fur. The Malinois leaned into her, breath warm and steady, eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun bled pale through the smoke. Around them, agents moved with purpose, clearing the field, securing prisoners, tending to the wounded with brisk efficiency. The worst was over. But Amanda's eyes drifted to the smoldering wreckage of the command center, to the bodies sprawled across the yard, to the cartel leader being dragged into an armored van, eyes dark and hateful. El Fantasma's words echoed cold and mocking in her ears, a warning that settled like ice in her gut. "They'll come back," she rasped, voice raw and broken. Ethan's hand landed firm on her shoulder, squeezing once, rough but steady. "Then we'll be ready," he growled. Amanda's eyes slipped shut, breath hitching, and Rex too pressed close, a low whine rumbling in his chest. They'd survived, battered and bleeding, but alive. And as long as they could fight, as long as they had breath in their lungs and teeth to bear, they'd hold the line.